welcome to Katrina's Creations. This is our Wednesday edition, and today we are going to do a knitting tutorial. Now, if this pattern is a free pattern, I'm going to tell you about it in just a minute. You could be a beginning knitter, or you could be a more advanced knitter. It's a fun pattern. The shawl pattern is called Reyna, and I'm still working on this, but I'll show you what it looks like so far. It is just a lot of garter stitch with a center, and there's the center so you can see it a little bit closer, and then there are sections of what they call mesh, which is eyelet. It looks more complicated than it is, and it's a very well written, easy to read pattern, so it's a perfect one if you want to try to learn some beginning knitting stitches and come out with a project. And it's also considered a one skein wonder, which means one skein of yarn will make it. So let's get a little bit more detail into the pattern. So the pattern is called Reyna. It is by Noora Backlund. So I will put a link to this pattern down below. Now it is free on Ravelry. You do not need to be a Ravelry member to get the free pattern. I am not a supporter of Ravelry in any way. I disagree with some of their views. However, when I looked for copies of this pattern, that was the easiest place to download from. So that's why the link is through them. So it is all on one page. And the nice thing about this pattern, it gives you all of the stitches that you're going to use. It tells you what materials you're going to need. And then there's a written version, or you can use the simple mark off chart here. There's 2 rows here that explain the garter stitch and 2 rows that explain how to do the mesh. And then you just mark it off as you work your way through the pattern. So it's very easy. There isn't a picture of the shawl itself on here, which is kind of surprising. But let's go over what you're going to need first to begin this pattern. The first thing you will need is 400 yards of fingering weight yarn. Now, I'm not making this in fingering weight yarn. I'm actually making this in, it's considered worsted. It's more like a light worsted, I'd say light worsted. So it calls for fingering weight, which is a 3 weight. So you can, like I said, modify it in any way you want to. Just be aware that if you go up a yarn size, like I'm doing the worsted weight, I went up in needle size, and you're going to need more yardage. So you just need to kind of adapt that. But if you're doing this in fingering weight, 400 yards is what a full 100 grams of fingering weight is. So that will work for you perfect. So you will need US 4 needles, which are also 3.5 millimeter needles. So they're the same thing. You will learn the knit stitch, the purl stitch, a yarn over, a knit through the back loop, knitting 2 together, slip slip knit, placing your marker and slipping your marker, and the right side and the wrong side of the pattern. Now, something that is not listed in the materials that you do need is a stitch marker. I actually used 2, and I'll explain that when I get to the pattern a little bit more, because there is a, well, maybe I'll explain it now. Because there's a definite center to the pattern, and there's one stitch that is always in the center, I put a stitch marker on each side. They just had you putting a stitch marker on one side of the center, and it can cause your center to meander a little bit if you get out of place with it. So I just find using 2 stitch markers worked better. So those are the supplies that you need. I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll get started on this. I am just starting with some double pointed needles just so they don't get in the way of the camera a whole lot. So your first thing that you need to do is cast on 3 stitches. So you're going to begin with a loose slip knot, like that. You can do any cast on method that you want, but for just 3 stitches, I'm just doing it the basic way, and that is to knit a stitch, but instead of taking it off of the right needle, I move it over to the left needle. So now I have 2 stitches, and now I I have 3. So there we go. Now we are ready to go. So row number 1 is going to be knit 1, knit 1, yarn over. Now a yarn over just means you move the yarn between the 2 needles so it's facing the front. And then you're going to place a mark. And then you're going to place a marker. I'm cheating. I'm just using a paper clip. I tried to think if you were in a situation where you don't have these, what can you use? So we're just going to put a paper clip there. That is our center stitch coming up next. So we knit 1. And again, the yarn is in the front. So you just roll your stitch marker around. You're just going to knit it how you normally would, but because the yarn is coming from the front, it automatically creates, and you can see it. You can see it right there. Now we have 3 stitches, and I still have 1 on the other needle. And then we are going to, in my case, this is where I would place that second marker so that I am definitely marking my center stitch. Now I'm going to do another yarn over. So again, the yarn comes to the front and I'm going to knit the stitch. So you can see here's where that yarn over is created. It creates an extra stitch, and these yarn overs will become holes in your work. So that's row 1. So then we turn our work. And row 2, we are going to knit 1. So there we've knitted 1. Now we come to a new stitch. This is knit through the back loop. So if you look closely, you have a little part of the stitch in the front, and you have a little part of the stitch in the back. These are called legs. So you always see that the one is facing in the front. This is the one you normally would knit through. But what this does by doing knitting through the back loop, it creates a twist in the stitch. So you were going in as if you're going to purl, and there, I'll turn this so you can see it. And then you're just going to knit as regular. So you can't see it real well yet, but you can see that stitch is twisted slightly. Okay, now your pattern is not going to show you slipping this marker because we've added it, but you're going to slip that marker. And then we do a knit stitch. So we're going to knit that stitch. Now it's going to tell you to slip that marker. So like I said, they only operate with 1. I just like it because I like that center stitch right between the 2 markers. We're going to do another knit through the back loop. So instead, again, of going through the front how you normally would knit, you're going to go in through the back and pick up that little back leg and then knit as you normally would, and then knit the last stitch. The other thing I really like about this pattern is she gives you a stitch count after every single row, so you can always be checking yourself to make sure that you're doing the right and correct thing. So now we're on to row 3. And I'm only going to do this for the first couple rows because then we get into the mesh sections and the garter section, and I will move to the project that I'm actually working on at this point so you can see it. So row 3, we are going to knit 2. So there is 1 and 2. We're going to yarn over, so we're moving our yarn to the front. We're going to slip the marker. And sometimes it helps just to move the marker into the front a little bit there. We're going to knit 1. We're going to slip that second marker, yarn over, and knit 2. So we're now up to 7 stitches. We're going to turn our work again. And this is actually the top center of the shawl. So this is the center point and these are the sides. So row 4, we're going to knit 2, 1 and 2. These needles are very pointy. I keep scooping up extra yarn. We're going to knit through the back loop. We're going to slip that extra marker. We're going to knit 1, slip the extra marker, knit through the back loop of the yarn over, and knit 2. And we haven't increased any stitches there. We are still at 7 stitches, but we twisted the yarn overs. So now we're going to be starting row 5, and I'm going to switch over to the actual shawl that I'm working on, because at this point of the pattern, and let me bring it over so you can see it. At this point of the pattern, we are right here, and it says rows 5 through 28, work the garter stitch. This is the right side. You're going to look down here at the bottom, and here's your garter stitch right side, and then this is the return row, which would be the garter stitch on the wrong side. So you're just going to be, and so you don't have to count your rows. You actually can see here, I've marked, here's my garter section, and I've done the right side, the wrong side, right side, wrong side. If you count this up, it goes rows 5 through 28, and you can actually mark them off as you go. So let's get started. I'm going to be doing these 2 rows right here. We are now starting the garter section. So it begins with knitting 2. This is the easiest of the sections. So you're going to knit 2, yarn over, and then you're going to knit until you reach the marker. So it's pretty simple. You can pause the video if you'd like until we get to the marker. I am now at the marker, and I am going to do a yarn over. I'm going to slip the marker like that. Whoop, that happens. And I'm going to knit the center stitch. Now if you're only doing the pattern with the 1 marker, you don't need to worry about this, but because I'm doing 2, I'm going to slide the second marker. Now for the second half of the first row of garter, you are going to yarn over just like you did on the other side, and you are going to knit to the last 2 stitches, and then the last 2 stitches you will do a yarn over and then knit those 2 stitches. So you can pause the video now and complete your row, and then we'll come back to show you what to do on the second row of the garter stitch. We are now ready to do the wrong side of the garter, and so you are going to begin by knitting 2 stitches. This is very similar to the first row with 1 exception. So you knit your first 2 stitches, and then you have a yarn over. Anytime you have a yarn over, when you come back on this row, you are going to knit through the back loop so it twists the stitch that is the yarn over. Here you can kind of see it twisted right there. It just gives it a little fancy to it. And now you are going to knit all the way across, 2 stitches before the marker, and you're just going to be doing the plain knit stitch until you reach 2 stitches before the marker. Now, I am 2 stitches before the marker. Now remember, I've added that extra marker, so Otherwise, the stitch would already be knitted. So what you are going to do is this last stitch, if you're using the 2 markers like I am, or if you are using the pattern, this would be the 2 stitches before the marker, because you would only be using this dark marker. Okay, this stitch right here, it's a yarn over, so you're going to knit through the back loop, slide your stitch marker, and you're going to knit that center stitch and slide the stitch marker, and then you have another yarn over here, so you guessed it, you're going to knit through the back loop. You are going to knit to the last 3 stitches, and that will be the wrong side of your garter stitch, of your garter chart, and then you could mark off over on your garter section your first 2 rows. So if you want to pause your video and go ahead and do this, then we will get on to the mesh section next. Now we're going to be doing the mesh section. So you can see the mesh sections are marked along here. If you want to use this section, this would be your mesh here, and it says right on it, work mesh. And you can look at my chart down here and see that here's the mesh section. I've got the last 2 rows to go. So I am actually on rows 73 through 88 is where I'm at in the pattern right now. And the mesh sections again are right down here. Here is the mesh for the right side and the mesh for the wrong side. And again, like I said, you can just mark off your rows as you go. So you can use this as a guide to keep track of your stitches, how many you should have, but it's all pretty much right here and here is what you're going to need for your pattern. So let's get started with the mesh section. So for the right side of the mesh section, you start out by knitting 2. So we have 1 and 2, and then you yarn over, you knit 1, so you've created an increase there. You've gone from 3 stitches to 4, and then you are going to, until you get to the marker in the center, you are going to yarn over and knit 2 together. This is the same as a knit stitch, but instead of 1 stitch like this, you are going to pick up 2 stitches, and try not to get it too tight. It's very easy to do this stitch tight, but you don't want it to be. So you're going to pick up those 2 stitches, and then you knit just as you normally would. And so you're not increasing or decreasing any stitches. Even though you're knitting 2 together, you've yarned over, so that gives you that extra stitch. So again, you're going to yarn over, and see if I can get this close so you can see it. Knit 2 together. You're going to continue this until you get to 2 stitches before the marker. So you can pause the video now and work your way across. Okay, I am now 2 stitches before my marker, so I am going to do the last 2 knit togethers. Then I'm going to yarn over, slip my marker, knit the center stitch, slip my other marker, which is not on the chart, but I want to, like I've said, keep that center stitch isolated so I know that's what it is. Then you're going to begin the other side, and you're going to be doing this one a little bit different. So you're going to yarn over, and you're going to slip, slip, knit. That's what SSK stands for. Now there's two ways to do this stitch. There is the traditional way, which is you go in as if you're purling. So just like how we did with the knit through the back stitch like this, you're going to slip one stitch, slip the second stitch, and then you go through and do a knit two together like this. That's one way of doing that stitch, which is like that. The other way, we're going to do our yarn over, and this is the way I do it because it's just easier. I go, using my right needle, I go through 2 stitches. So you can see I've got them picked up right here, and then I just knit them. So I am knitting 2 together, but I'm doing it from a different position so it twists the stitches. Either way works. So again, I'll do the first one. We'll do the yarn over, and you would slip, slip, and then knit the 2 stitches together like this. To me, this one's a little bit more tedious. And then the other one, the way I do it, I knit or yarn over first, and then slip through those 2 stitches. There they are. And then I knit the 2 together like that. So you can do either way, and you are going to do this until you have 3 stitches left. I'm now at the last 3 stitches, and these last 3 I'm going to do a yarn over, knit 1, and then another yarn over and knit 2. And you can see, looking at this pattern, even in the garter stitch, see if you can see it up close, you can see these little holes that are created. That's from the yarn overs, so it gives you a finished edge. So that is row 1, or the right side of the mesh. So let's turn our work over, and we're going to go back across the yarn overs and knit 2 togethers for the wrong side. So we're going to begin by knitting 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then we are going to purl until 1 stitch before the marker. So you're going to, in order to purl, you're going to pull your yarn between the 2 needles, and you're going to go in, move this up close here, you're going to go in through the front, so not like a knit stitch like this. You go in between like this, and you wrap the needle and then pull it off. So unlike a knit stitch where you're going here and you're wrapping around the back, your right needle is going to be in the front. So you go in the front and keep the needle in the front. Wrap it and go from there. I'll do a couple more purl stitches. You're going to wrap, even your yarn overs are going to be done the same way, and you're going to purl all the way until 1 stitch before the marker. So if you want to pause the video and go to 1 stitch before the marker, I'll show you what to do. Now if you are following the pattern exactly and just have 1 marker, then you would be knitting to 1 stitch before the marker. But because of the way I'm doing this with 2, I know this is my center stitch right here. So I'm 1 stitch before the marker, and in my case I am going to purl that last stitch and slip that marker, knit the center stitch, slip the next marker. So there's my center stitch. And then to save some time on this video, I'm not going to show purling all the way across again, but from here you're going to move your yarn forward again. You are going to purl the other side all the way across to the last 2 stitches, and then knit those last 2 stitches. So that is the right and the wrong side for the mesh, and when you're finished that, you would be checking off 2 rows in the mesh for whatever section you are working on at that time, which in my case, you can see right here, I will be marking off those last 2 of the mesh. Now the last section we are going to be doing of your shawl would be the bind off section. Now you can do, if depending on how much yarn you have left over, you could do a I-cord bind off, you could do a stretchy bind off. I'm going to show you how to do the traditional bind off just because it's the easiest and it uses the least amount of yarn. So we're going to pretend I'm at the end of a row because I'm actually right in the middle, but we're going to pretend I'm at the end. So you are going to knit 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2, and then you use your left needle and pick up that first stitch and put it over top. You're now down to 1 stitch, and then you would knit another stitch, and you're going to pick up the stitch all the way to the right and pull it over the top. So you still have 1 stitch. So you're going to do, I'm going to show you one more time. You're going to knit, try not to do this too tightly either, you want to loosely bind off. So you have the 2 stitches, you pick up the one all the way to the right and pull it over top of the one on the left. And you can see right here, it's binding off. So I hope this tutorial has been helpful to you and that you enjoy making the Reyna shawl. And if you do, please send me a picture. I would love to see it. Thanks for watching.